Good afternoon. Welcome to the Psychic Zone with Todd Siegel on this stormy day, and it's Monday. I don't even know what the date is, March 16th. Anyway, greetings. I think the last podcast I did was the one interview with another psychic in Hawaii. Hope you enjoyed that. So the weather has been really it's been kind of vicious lately. It's been back and forth, and we had ice storms and cold, and then it gets real warm. Out west, they're boiling. I think it's triple-digit weather right now on the West Coast. So yeah, it's been some real crazy weather. I think a lot of it has to do with solar storms, sun activity, that kind of thing. I do also feel that there are some shifts with the Earth, the alignment. And I think this could go on probably for a good portion of the next couple years, actually. I don't have any predictions about the spring or summer right now, but I have a feeling the East Coast could actually be kind of cool this summer. Now, it might be more north of where I am in Virginia, but I think that the East Coast will have a rather cool year. And let's see if I see anything in the middle part of the country. I feel a lot of rain along the Mississippi River, and I believe there could be a lot of flooding out in the plains and anywhere where the Mississippi goes through. And that means all the way up to, if I'm correct, Iowa. Anyway, I kind of gather different topics from readings I do for people, and a lot of people are very concerned about the war in Iran and what's going on with that. I am concerned too. Although I do think movement is good. Changing people can be a good thing too. And I'm not on one side or another. I'm basically right in the middle. But I don't think this is going to go down very well. 2029 comes to me as a time of a power change or some kind of change in Israel, which concerns me. So I feel the powers that be could change. And I also think I feel this Iran war. I think I said in 2024, if I recollect, that war was going to last 3 years. So basically we're on the second year, could go on for another year. But I also see something big around 2029 as well. But, people need to change. Unfortunately, the people are being misguided by these governments, corrupt governments. That goes for every country around the world. And everybody thinks they're right, and we have such a division on our hands between average people and then the other culture. In fact, I was reminded of this the other day. Because people are saying, well, the cost of living, my expenses have gone up, 10, 15%. And I see it every single day, but I don't even know how you could put it into a percentage, because some costs out there are on such a completely different scale, almost like, what the F sort of scale that I've ever seen in my lifetime. I mean, I'm blown away by the cost increases with certain things. So I couldn't even put it on a percentage, If I was still a builder and I was building homes or doing renovations, I honestly, I wouldn't even know how to figure out costs now. Because some things are slightly up and then some things are way out in the universe high. So the economy, I believe, will stay this way for another 3 years. And, I have a lot of clients who are trying to move. They're trying to sell their homes. It's going to be more of a buyer's market, I think, right now than it will be a seller's market. So it'll be hardened sales. And if you do follow the Eastern astrology and Chinese astrology, we are in a fire horse year. It's a double fire year. Whatever it's going to be, whether it's economy or business, is going to be intense. I think if you have a sign which has a lot of fire signs in it, let's say you're a Leo, or maybe you're Sagittarius, or an Aries, it will hit you in a more profound way. It's good in certain things, but I think play it safe is a good thing too. And you might feel just a little overwhelmed with this year. That goes for the Chinese zodiac signs too, the ones that are in the fire position for the year. And you'd have to look that up. I can't tell you which ones they are. Mine's in a wood position, so I do belong to a fire sign, which is the snake, but I'm also in a wood year. There's wood, metal, water, fire, wood, metal, water, fire, and earth. Okay, I think I said that right. I hear a lot of, I'm not an astrologer, but I hear a lot of astrologers talking about more positive things for what they call the collective of the earth. And I don't really see that. I see us becoming actually more divided. The ones who are probably listening to me are conscious people, and probably in a more stable sort of position in their spirituality in their life. Whereas there's dark forces out there, on the other hand, who I don't think will change, I don't think can change. And so I don't see enlightenment among those people. I think basically they kind of stay in their little corners, but I think they stay pretty much the same. And on a kind of a dark course, I've seen some real, seems like a lot of people are leaving the earth right now. And I predicted that in 2022. I said there was going to be a clearing out of life on Earth. And somebody asked me too, I'm going back to some questions. They asked me, when do I see a dramatic change on Earth? And I really had to kind of let it sink in for a while. And I'm really bad with numbers, but I kept having a dream many years ago, and it kept recurring. And that's the one thing about dreams. Dreams are usually are subconscious, but every now and then we will get what I call a visionary dream. And that's one that keeps showing up. If it's about ourselves, most likely it may not happen that way. It could be a fear that you have, could be anxieties, could be your lack of confidence. But I kept having a dream years ago, and I was looking at the planet Earth, and I saw a lot of water, water around me, like waters on the shore of some country or continent. And the terrain, it looked very lush, like there was a lot of lush plant life. But I saw so much water everywhere. And then in one of the dreams, I kind of focused in on a house because I did not see a lot of people on Earth. I know that's kind of a scary thing, but I did not feel the presence of cities and lots of people. And I saw a house. Looked like a modest size house, small house. And this is somewhere in the future. I knew it was the future. And I saw a car outside. It didn't look like one of those space alien machines that you see driving around today. It looked like an average car of some sort. I could see a chimney. I could see smoke coming from a fireplace. Nothing looked like, something out of the Jetsons, in the future. But I knew this is the future. And I've been really focusing on this dream because I'm like, well, what changed? So the last few days I've actually been focusing more on that dream. And timeline, I put it at 2,000 years in our future. And that's that seems like a long time. But 2,000 years ahead of us. And focusing in on this dream, I also see that at that point, I think a lot of the life on this planet went to another planet, somewhere else. And which planet did I get? I actually got the moon as one base for people to live on. I thought everything might have been destroyed. There was some kind of, war, bad event on Earth, but I'm actually feeling that a lot of Earth relocated. And then looking at life on Earth, I also saw well, I saw this water, I also saw this lush green, but I also saw real irregularities in the climate. I saw this lush green place and I saw snowflakes coming down, which is kind of odd to me. Although, if I look out my window today, it's not too far away from that. So, I think a lot of changes happen on our planet, and it's hard to say when, but I get about between 1,500 and 2,000 years from now. But I'll let you know how it goes at that time. I'm just kidding. So, if anybody has access to this podcast in the future that can say, well, sorry, buddy, I heard your podcast from 2,000 years ago. You're completely wrong. What else? I have written down some things that some of my clients like to hear about. Dealing with loss, dealing with the loss of a loved one is very, very hard. It doesn't matter which loved one, but I think the most significant one is losing parents. Losing parents. Of course, the tragic loss of a child is on a completely different scale of tragedy. But, and I do talk to those people too. And I have for many, many years. I've been doing this for over 25 years. I cannot believe I've been doing this that long. But I think one of the things, and I remember a long, long time ago, I did a reading for a woman who I was very apprehensive about reading because I felt that I didn't have anything positive to tell her. She was on her deathbed, actually. She was dying of cancer. And she did die a couple weeks later after the reading. And I was thinking about it and thinking about it for days before her reading, how I was going to do this reading. And some people came forth who were deceased, and it was her parents. And I think that it made her less scared. It made her feel like she was coming home. And to me, I keep thinking about this Woody Allen quote. He says, life is all about misery and suffering, and it ends too short. And life is really a tough thing. And I think understanding death, understanding where we go, can help. And if you are somebody like me who has dealt with sensitivities of this magnitude, and I believe all my life too, I just didn't acknowledge these abilities till I was in my 30s. But life's a scary thing. It's really, you know, if somebody told me they've gone through their life completely happy and in a good mood their whole life, I'd think I'd like to know what kind of drugs they've been on. And I tend to get readings that are really, really not the norm. People tend to come to me with some really difficult stuff, even psychics and mediums. But dealing with loss, I think the first way I would coach somebody is to understand spirit and understand the other side. Because it's not another side. Of course, our brains learn and they function, and then there's responses from the brain that tell us to breathe, there's responses that tell us to eat, there's parts of the brain that make us hear. But there's other parts of what comes into our brain that are not from the brain. So you have to understand that. It's like somebody comes to me and they say, well, I want a mediumship reading. And I kind of look at them like, well, it's not like I put on a different hat and connect with the dead. Psychic abilities are always interacting with spirit, visions, manifestations, voices, all phenomena from the other side too. It's not like you can have really one or the other. But some people specialize more in mediumship, and some specialize more in psychic abilities. Most psychics I know can do both, but they may specialize more in one field or the other. And that's the way we all are. I mean, I know some psychics that wouldn't want to deal with what I've got to do in detective work. That's not their thing. And I know some mediums who are excellent psychics and psychic detectives too. They happen to be mediums, but they are also very good at detective work. So, back to understanding death. After doing readings for so long, I can say I do not have a clear vision of what happens on the so-called other side in the spirit world. Just like when I'm doing a mediumship reading, not everything comes as a clear voice into my head. It's a lot of little pieces. And I'm basically an interpreter to those putting all those little pieces of the puzzle together. There have been some readings that are so pronounced from the other side that it gives me the shivers too. And those have happened. So with dealing with loss, you have to understand that the first part of our psyche is really having trouble coping without that person here in our presence. We can't talk to them. We can't make them breakfast. We can't be with them. Okay? So loss is a terrible thing in that respect. And when we're more emotional, and I know this from customers, so the more emotional we are, the less capable we are of communicating with spirits that have passed. And that goes for me when I'm doing a reading for somebody and they get really emotional about the person that passed, and they want answers. But that makes my job really hard. I close off. I just close off completely. And it's a really hard thing. How can you not be emotional about somebody you lost? So it's very hard to be sensitive when you've got so much emotion going on. And it really takes practice to put yourself in a more open, sensitive position. Some people, even psychics, can go through this for periods of their life where they just pack it up and say, you know what, I just cannot do readings anymore. And I've seen some of those people, they'll go 5-10 years. But then all of a sudden, one day they wake up and like, I need to be doing this work again. Where do I start? And I'm like, well, you don't have to start anywhere. You just come in where you left off. But talking about the brain again. And of course, scientists and doctors, can tell you a lot about the brain. But the information that you are getting is not completely from automatic, systematic things that you see, that you hear, that you learn. Because our brain is kind of a tool. And I think that some of the visions that I've had of the other side, it's something that most brains could not comprehend. It's the most incredible, psychological thing you can imagine. The one thing that's really, that really strikes me as interesting is that there's no time. The future is your present, the past is in the future. Everything in time is not as it is in our lives here on Earth. We wake up with the sun, and the sun goes down, and then winter's over, and spring comes. We live in this reality of time, but on the other side, there is that time. I've watched a documentary with people who've had near-death experiences, and some of these people are actually dead for a matter of minutes. Came awake with these incredible visions of the spirit world. They saw people in spirit that they once knew. Now keep in mind, it could be previous lives too, before you were born. Who were the people who you knew in your past lives? What about in the future? Can you see the future too on the other side? Yes, you can. I know that because I've I've had people in spirit give me predictions about the future that came true. So it's really something that you have to really focus on. And focusing on the other side sometimes leads you to more information about the other side. So it's kind of, the way the other side comes to me sometimes is like an old-fashioned radio where you're turning the stations with the dial, and all of a sudden you're getting little fuzzy stations. They're coming in and out, and then all of a sudden you turn it a little bit more and you get the station that's right on the money. It's loud, clear. And you listen to it for a little bit in your car, and then you're driving down the road, and all of a sudden it starts fading out, and then you hear it a little bit, and then it fades out. It's exactly what that's exactly what mediumship, psychic abilities, it can vary quite a bit, just like that. So just remember this: if somebody passed and you really miss them, don't try to get that clear signal. Get a little bit. What is your mind saying? It's not just your imagination. Because I don't really believe in imagination. I think imagination is also mixed in with our abilities, our psychic abilities. I think it's also mixed in with past lives that we've lived. Another question from somebody was, do we keep coming back to this life? And I don't. Do we decide? I do think we decide. I do think so. I don't think it's an unconscious choice. But it depends on what capacity we come back to this life in. What do I mean by that? Will you come back as a human or possibly animal form entity in this life? Or will your spirit come back into someone and come back and forth, leave, come back, return, that kind of thing? So when I look at past lives, I don't feel past lives are always the same. I don't think we always come back as a physical form. One of the good examples of that are animals. Now, I've had this happen since I've had a farm for decades. You will lose an animal, and then let's say you adopt an animal later on, and all of a sudden that animal starts acting like the one that you lost. I hear this all the time, and they're like, well, he must have reincarnated. But how could he do that if he was born before my other animal passed? And I will tell them, because that spirit of the animal you lost, part of that spirit is in the new animal that you adopted. I've got that with a horse outside. One of my horses, my mare, well, she was born before I lost my other horse, my favorite horse. And they look a lot alike, even though she's a lot smaller. But I started seeing mannerisms in this horse that only the horse that I lost had. It freaked me out. I've never, I mean, really specific stuff. It was just the personality, the temperament. They're not even the same breed of horse. She started shaking her head the same way. You could see it in her eyes. And she's still alive to this day. So I really do believe the spirit of my other horse is in her. But he's not necessarily, he didn't come back in a physical form, but he's influenced this horse. I've seen this with children too. I remember hearing clients talking about their father who they just, adored and loved, and this father was such a big influence in their life. And then they have this baby, little boy or a little girl. I remember in this case it was a little girl. And she started talking about the father, and she didn't even know him. She started saying things that he would say as a young kid. The problem is our society is so full of BS that we dismiss these little things as coincidence, It's amazing how hardened people's minds are out there. And, the one thing this is really about is enjoying your life, enjoying the journey to learn, because it's not all about getting a job, paying taxes, getting sick, and dying. And I know that's the reality for a lot of people out there. And there's, even people in my family that believe that. It's kind of a shame. It's really a shame. I've dealt with what I believe were past lives of myself that just won't leave me. I've had these recurring visions since I was like in my early 20s. And I really do believe that those things happened to me, or a spirit came to me who lived that life and hasn't left me. Some psychics will talk about spirit guides. Spirit guides can be spirits that were once alive. Some will have the same spirit guides, and some will have different spirit guides throughout their life. We're all connected to one another. I don't necessarily, and this was one question I was asked about the connection to family. I don't necessarily believe that we choose our parents. That's just me. I know a lot of you believe that that's what happens. I don't necessarily believe that. Although what's interesting is, and you can ask yourself this, do you feel that you were younger spiritually than your parents? Or do you feel that you were older spiritually than your parents? And as I've often heard from clients, you know, I've adored my mother my whole life, but I feel like I've been her mother my whole life. I hear that quite often. So maybe we're supposed to be with our parents, but on what level? And the more questions we ask, the better we get at solving all these mysteries, because being a psychic for over 25 years, I have more questions than I do answers. I mean, some of these readings, and people think, you know, oh, okay, well, yeah, the guy's been lucky once in a while. He's solved a few cases. He's found some missing pets. And this happens every single day. You know, whether it's a health problem with a child, or whether it's some kind of business somebody's starting or leaving, or person going through a divorce or something like this. I see, I see the visions come alive time after time after time. You know? Somebody was also asking me about, can you read for yourself? And for me personally, no. This gets into the spirit realm too, because if I have a real pressing question about something regarding myself, I will often turn to spirit or ask spirit for an answer. And I don't necessarily connect with spirit guides, but a few years ago, I had this spirit of somebody who was once alive, a woman, and it was so pronounced and came to me so vividly that I thought it might have been somebody that I once knew who passed away. And I started looking on the internet for a few names of what I could guess was this person and her age. She was older. And I looked up this one psychic that I once knew who was older, and no, she's still alive. And I couldn't figure out who it was. And I would ask this person questions about certain things that were happening in my life, and she'd give me an answer. And I was a little skeptical, but she was absolutely right about the outcome of things. And I've kind of lost touch with her. And this is the way sometimes these little guides can be. Sometimes they're with you your whole life, and then sometimes they just come in and out. I wasn't looking for somebody, I just kept hearing this woman talking to me. And so in figuring out our own stuff, The problem is we're too emotional, we're too biased, we have low self-confidence, I mean, you might look at tonight's dinner and say, you know what, I just know I'm going to have stomach problems later. So, maybe you're calling the shots before it happens there, and maybe you're influencing the outcome that way. And I've known people who had these terrible fears about something health-wise, and I hate to say, but they died of something else completely. So I don't trust what I say to myself or analyze myself. I've dealt with anxiety my whole life. It's a hard thing to cope with. And I've had some clients who wanted me to help them with anxiety. And I do think I'm qualified because I've had it my whole life. It's like it's like going through, rehab for drug addiction. And you're getting help from somebody who's never had a drug addiction before. Would you trust them? I wouldn't. If I was an alcoholic, I'd want help from somebody who's been there, who knows it. So, with anxiety and fear, I know quite a bit about it. I really thought it was invented when I was born. I was a very fearful child. Very fearful of people. I could see right through them. I could see the ghosts that were around them. Although I didn't realize it at the time, I thought everybody could do the same thing. I went to locations where I felt tragedy all around me, and come to find out tragedies happen at those places. I went to cities and places around the world that I've never seen before. I knew them. I think the one thing, if you're dealing with an anxiety or fear, is to take a break from yourself. I know that sounds like a, kind of a silly thing to say. But I sometimes just get completely mad and fed up with my fear. And, oftentimes we keep our fear because we're around insensitive people who don't understand that fear and make that fear much worse. I've been doing a lot of that lately, analyzing some fears that I have, and can understand that a lot of them were made worse by people that I was around. But a lot of it has to do with how we communicate to ourselves, how we feel about ourselves. And I don't often agree with therapists and their resolution for fear and anxiety. Because most people just don't get it. I mean, if you're fearful of planes and you're about to board a plane, the last thing that you can think about is a technique of breathing or tapping yourself or listening to something. you freeze. You are in panic. There is no time for consoling, for listening to a meditation tape. You know, when you're in fear mode, nothing gets through. Have you been there before? I have, many, many times. So preparation is really important. And that can take years in some cases. Years. So give yourself time. But you know, when you do an activity, well, let's say you're a painter, or you're trying to get back into painting again, and you're going to be so rigid, and it's going to take you such a long time to try to do it. But once you have a little boost in confidence about it, it goes quick. You get right back into it. You do better than you've ever done before. So the anxiety and fears, it becomes embedded in our body. Okay, it's not just a mind thing. It becomes embedded in our bodies. So it's kind of like that painting thing I just talked about. What's going on here? Well, your body is not used to using the brush a certain way. Okay, you gotta loosen the wrists. All sorts of preparation. So it's like, kind of supporting your confidence there with the usage of color and practicing things without making your grand, canvas piece can help. So anxiety first takes not really getting rid of the anxiety, but replacing it with confidence building tools. And I'll use more examples in the future, but I'm a real outdoor enthusiast, and since I turned 60 last year, I have I have gotten obsessed with some of my outdoor pursuits, and they're very important to me because I've spent a long time doing readings for people, and I want to continue to do it, but I don't want to be burnt out. And you can go through burnout really quickly doing this work. It's really hard on the mind, the body, the voice. So it's really important to do outdoor activities. Now, doing some of these outdoor activities, I had fear and anxiety about doing them again. Well, last year I was starting to surf. I haven't surfed for probably about 40 years. Well, maybe about 35 years. And took a couple shots, and then once I started to say, no, you're really good at this, I started going down waves, and I was doing really well. In fact, there were other people out in the water. There was this one guy out there, and I told him how long it's been since I surfed. And, he said, I don't understand. I said, well, I used to be a semi-pro surfer in my teens. I was competitive. I went into contests. I won some contests. I was pretty good. And he says, no wonder. He says, you really didn't lose it. And I said, yeah, it's pretty amazing, you know. Then last year I took up windsurfing. And I'm actually kind of in training to become an instructor one day. But I'm out in the water all the time. And I would say in a short amount of time, I've come a long way in a very short amount of time. But you have fear and you have anxiety of being out there. And usually sometimes I'll go out and I'll come back in, take a break. I'll force myself to take a break. And, I'll often analyze and focus on things that I want to practice on, with the conditions at hand. And then I'll go out and I feel better the second time because I'm building my confidence. But just try this with anxiety. If you're fearful about something, then build up confidence in a new way with something unrelated to that. I mean, we all have fear of our health, okay? That's a normal thing to protect ourselves. Well, maybe tonight, instead of focusing on that health fear that you have, what part about your health gives you confidence? And focus on that. If you have a hurting knee and it's been bothering you lately, well, tonight focus on your shoulders. Move your neck. Do some other exercises. Stop focusing on that one thing that you have anxiety about. Because you can't get rid of anxiety, but you can build up another confidence in your life. So I think I will cut this podcast a little short this evening. Don't want to make it too long and bore you. But when it's posted, give me your comments. Let me know what you'd like to hear about in the future. I do have some people in people that follow me that want to hear. I did talk about this on a live the other night on YouTube about my what my beliefs are about aliens and people on other planets. And so I had a couple specific questions from people. One person asked, are they here? Are aliens here on this earth? I said, yeah. Definitely. I believe that there are people walking around who weren't born here. I had, I would say, a couple of experiences that lend to that I truly believe they were people from somewhere else. The other thing too is we are aliens ourselves. I mean, we did not come from this planet. Yes, we were born here. I'm talking about where the human race originally came from. Because even if you look at science and you look at some of the, you know, comets hitting Earth and the Ice Age, I mean, humans couldn't survive through a lot of the cataclysms that we went through. I mean, there is proof of that. So, but I do know that we are not from Earth originally. And I also think that we will probably discover more about this in years to come, because I think there's people who are motivated by this. And I think that when I really use psychic abilities to look at what Earth was like millions of years ago, I believe that we had a very advanced race of people on this planet. Not a huge population, but the technology that I could see was nothing that we have that comes close to it. See, I feel that there was this, that we are kind of the leftovers. That a few thousand years ago, maybe 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, we started again. And that's why we are still in a very primitive age, technology-wise. When it comes to everything, health. I mean, we still drive automobiles with gas or electric. Basically runs off of fuel too, when you look at the source of it. So our technology today is way behind the technology that I see that was once on Earth millions of years ago. But I also feel, because we were once an alien race, that it's not through development that we develop our race. It's also in our DNA, kind of like a time, like a time-lapse capsule that lasts like 24 hours, We have that kind of mechanism in our DNA, which I don't think scientists can see, where we are developing a certain way and children are becoming very different today than we were as kids, because it's in our DNA system. And that is something that even the most gifted scientists can't see. So I don't think we're changing because of visitations necessarily from alien races, or because our minds are becoming more advanced, but I think it's part of our genetic makeup. And that's a little food for thought. And I hope you enjoyed this. And I do want to come back on here soon, make a regular thing of it. And anyway, after you hear this, leave me your comments, and I wish you a good evening here on planet Earth. Take care. Good night.